And as a result, we have not had one single theme of our congregation. It was, when I first came, a classical Reformed congregation, which is probably what attracted me here. I came from a very classical Reformed background myself, where I was born in St. Paul, Minnesota. I never heard of the word Zionism. When I was in Chicago at Sinai Temple, which was the preeminent cathedral congregation of Chicago, and a classical Reform from Emil G. Hirsch 2 generations ago to Louis Mann, and so on. So this was what I was coming out of. Rabbi Franklin, Leo Franklin, who was the rabbi here for almost 50 years, and who shaped the theological and sociological ideas of the congregation, made Bethel. Rabbi Glazer, his successor, was here only 10, 11 years, much too soon to shape a different direction, although he fit into that mold, and he was a great rabbi. So therefore, when Bethel became available after Rabbi Glazer's untimely death at the age of only 48, 49 years old, and he dropped dead, I was very attractive to that idea. This was a metropolitan congregation, and in a sense the only congregation of Reformed Judaism in the mother congregation of Reformed Judaism of Michigan. Other congregations have come from us. And after a great schism in 1941, when Rabbi Franklin retired and Rabbi Fram, his associate, was not elected as his successor, he went out and organized a new congregation in 1941, took about 75 members with him, more than half of whom came back to Bethel. And so Bethel was the preeminent cathedral synagogue of Reform Judaism in all of Michigan. This was a great challenge and very attractive, because I was then 36 years old, envisaged myself as being cast into that mold. I don't want to use the word Bishop of Michigan, but many others have said that the rabbi of Bethel was the Bishop of Michigan.
What did it feel like coming into that at 36?
I didn't realize how young I was, and I thought I knew everything, and then ran into someone like Leonard Simons, who was then the vice president and became the president of the congregation, and who really thought I was part of the Simons Michelson advertising agency, one of his employees. And I was not used to that. At Sinai Temple in Chicago, we had an understanding. The board took care of the money, the finances, and the rabbi took care of the congregation. And we had a president for 35 years. And his father before him was also president. So I was not used to this kind of democracy, but it was something I learned very quickly. This was a different community with different ideas, and in Chicago, if somebody didn't like the way Dr. Mann preached or taught or his ideas, they joined another congregation. There must have been 15 or 20 other Reformed congregations in the Chicago area. In Detroit, there was only one, Bethel. And that was part of its greatness. It's also part of its problems, because the rabbi had to be rabbi for all the people. And that was what I had to learn.
How do you do that?
Well, the first thing I had to do with the yarmulke. In classical Reformed congregations, there were no yarmulkes, ever. at services or at weddings or even at funerals. I learned that you become a Reformed Jew at the drop of a hat. And I learned, too, that I must always carry a yarmulke in every suit pocket in case I'm with more traditional people and families who are not of the classical reform. The second challenge came when I first came was bar mitzvah. The congregation had not had bar mitzvahs for more than 50 years. They had been abolished as part of the classical reform mood. Rabbi Glazer had promised that in the future there would be bar mitzvahs, but he was taking his time. It was not an easy time in the post-war world. The war was over, the soldiers were coming back, and there was a lot of turmoil in society in the late 40s and early 50s. So the first thing I had to deal with when I came here was the question of bar mitzvah. I asked a committee to be appointed to study the matter, to bring in some recommendations of guidelines. I added my own, and I said there must be girls being bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, as well as boys. That was also a new idea. Moreover, there should be standards for preparation, not just walk in the week before the boy's 13th birthday and said, today I'm going to be bar mitzvah. But there must be standards of preparation for learning Hebrew, for being able not just to mumble and mimic the words, but to have some understanding of what it means to be a son of the commandment, a bar mitzvah, and the same with girls. Slowly, those ideas were implemented, the standards were maintained, and the first year we only had maybe a few bar mitzvahs, but by and by the idea took hold, so much so that over the years, bar mitzvah began to challenge confirmation. I had not exactly foreseen that bar mitzvah would become so popular, and everything that with bar mitzvah, the parties and the presents and all of the things that I had hoped would not happen, began to happen. And confirmation, which really was like a graduation exercise for a class of boys and girls who had studied for 8 years together, 9 years. Confirmation went down in emphasis, in importance, and while we still have it today, it is not nearly as important in the eyes of the young boys and girls as bar and bat mitzvah. But we did that. The third thing that was the biggest challenge of all had to do with the temple itself. This was a beautiful temple on Woodward and Gladstone, designed by Albert Kahn, a great architect, who had designed this temple right after the Lincoln Memorial was built in Washington. It didn't have the setting, but it did have the same classical columns and design with the Greek columns, and it was just as beautiful inside as out. Moreover, it was paid for, and that was a very big plus. When I first came to the temple and I saw this magnificent new old temple, all we needed, I said, was parking, off-street parking, and more classrooms for our growing religious school. I had put a great emphasis in the religious school. I earned my PhD at Northwestern University in religious education and history, and adapted some of those ideas into improving and implementing the religious school. I was fortunate that we had a marvelous director already in place when I came, Dr. Norman Drochler. Norman Drochler was with us for 12 or 14 years, maybe more, until he was pirated by the Board of Education of the city of Detroit to be its new superintendent. I couldn't keep him with that kind of a challenge and offer. But he was a wonderful partner in building the religious school. What we needed was more classrooms. We had a gymnasium in the basement of the old temple that hadn't been used for years. So we had an architect come in and convert that lovely old gym into 7 modern air-conditioned classrooms to add to our facilities. The other thing was we needed off-street parking. There was no place to park, and in Rabbi Franklin's day there weren't as many cars, but with 2-family, 3-car families, we needed off-street parking. We had a gift, a legacy from some lady who gave us money with which to buy the homes immediately behind the old temple. We leveled them, created a large off-street parking lot. And so we had parking, we had classrooms, but there was one thing I wanted. That was a nursery school. I believed that education of a Jewish child, which is the name of a book I wrote, the education of a Jewish child begins in the cradle, when the child is 2, 3, 4 years old, long before they get to kindergarten and school. A nursery school for 2- and 3-year-olds was what I wanted to see. But we couldn't have it because we couldn't pass the health and safety recommendations of the city of Detroit. You had to have certain exits, you had to have fire, there were many regulations that we could never qualify for. So that had to be put off till we built a new temple. I originally was not in favor of building a new temple. I thought we had this beautiful place, paid for, magnificent classrooms, a great location on Piety Hill, on the street with all the churches of the major churches of Detroit, the Catholic Cathedral just a couple of blocks away. And so what do we need a new temple for? We have all the facilities. That sounded all fine and good until 1968, the riots of Detroit. They came and leveled the city. Fortunately, the word went out, since I had been very involved with the social action and changing neighborhoods and working with black people in churches, that Hertz's temple was not to be touched. We didn't have one single broken window. All around us, 12th Street, Claremont, were fire blasted. And Carl Adams, our superintendent for many years, helped get that word out. Bethel was not to be touched. And we weren't.
What kind of involvement had you had in the local community?
I had a lot.
From 51 to 68?
Yes.
That's a long time.
For those years, I was very involved. In fact, too much involved, according to my people and my board of trustees. I went to the churches. I spoke at their clubs and their luncheons, and I occupied the pulpits of churches, and I was very involved and one of the leaders in the changing neighborhood movement, where I implored our white people to stay where they were, not to flee. And many stayed. Our neighborhood, well, it deteriorated because it was a much older neighborhood. It was not the problem with blacks, it was a problem with whites. They got hysterical. They thought their property values were going down. I fought a losing battle, but the payoff was the riots of '68. And from then on, I kept saying that the new expressway that was just being built was going to run in two directions, back and forth, up and back. And again, that sounded very good, but in rhetoric. But the fact of the matter is that a church or a synagogue must be where the children are. And parents were not going to bring their children back into the inner city of Woodward and Gladstone, either for Sunday school or Hebrew school or midday classes, or for that matter, adult education in the evenings.
So your population moved?
Fled. The white population, whites, Jews, and Christians, fled from the city after '68, and there was no keeping back. Meanwhile, we had bought some property, more as a safety than anything else, out on the new expressway that was being built at 9 Mile Road and the expressway. The more we got into that, however, we realized that there were no exits or entrances being on the drawing board of that new expressway near our property. So we sold it to the telephone company, and the Michigan Bell have their offices on the old Temple Bethel property. We began to look elsewhere. And finally, it was not easy to find a large area of many acres in the Northwest area. 5 or 10 acres, yes, but we needed 30 acres until this piece of property on Telegraph and 14 Mile Road became available. We thought that would be way out on the northwest side. Well, it was at that time. And we bought this piece of property. After '68, it was very clear that we could not remain in the old temple. The riots had done us in, as so many other institutions. And we decided to move. Choosing an architect was also an experience. I kept saying to our building committee, you're going to pay architectural fees. They're all standard. You're going to pay a lot of money for an architect. You might as well get a great architect as some local fellow who wants to make a reputation for himself on us. So we went all over the country. Bob Canvasser was one of those in those earlier days. The other people are dead. But what we did was to go to see the work of other great architects who had built synagogues before. We went to Buffalo, New York. We went to Rochester. We went to the United Nations. We went really all over. either the architects whom we wanted were not available, or they had different ideas that we couldn't adopt. And finally, it occurred to us that one of the great architects of America, who had built immense buildings, including the United Nations and many other buildings all over the world, was in our backyard. Yamasaki. Minoru Yamasaki and his associates built institutions on Wayne University campus and elsewhere. And that was how we came to Yamasaki.
What was he like to work with?
He was a perfectionist, an idealist, one who had studied Judaism because he built one other synagogue, and that was my former temple in Chicago, in Glencoe, Illinois, the North Shore congregation where I first started out as a freshman rabbi. And I had bumped into Yamasaki when he was building the McGregor Center at Wayne State University. And he told me about what he was doing in Chicago and even showed me the plans, and I got so excited about what he was doing and filed it away in memory of what he was doing and what he was like. He was a small person with great energy and had magnificent taste. He brought in an idea of light and bringing in the outside in of nature, of trees and flowers, to enhance the beauty of it. When he finally did design a new temple for us, he had in mind of bringing in a great landscape architect, an artist, to do the kind of planting that would cost almost $1 million. You could build a temple on what he had in that. Moreover, his first design costed out to $11 million. Well, our people nearly died. When he brought in the design and told us what the bottom line was going to be, and here we had signed up with him, we didn't know what to do. He explained to us that the greatest cost of building is the roof. And he had a square, almost like a pagoda-like. So I said, how about reducing the roof? Making a tent. The tent of meeting from our ancient wanderings of the Jewish people. Well, he picked up that idea and developed the idea of a tent with where there would be practically no roof, since he said that was the most expensive part of building. And he poured concrete into an architectural genius. Architects have come from all over just to gaze and wonder at the way in which he designed our sanctuary. A cantilever, all resting on 4 pillars, 2 in the front and 2 in the rear. And it was an actor. He was a genius. You ask how it was to work with him. We had a big building committee of 30, 40 people, but only 3 people would meet with Yamasaki. One on the design and construction. That was Bob Canvasser. One on the money, who would pay for it, and that was Milton Bresner. And the third person was myself on the function of what should go inside the making of a temple. We would go to his office at 10 o'clock in the morning, and around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Yama would say, "I'm getting hungry." And we would then go to lunch, I taking 2 aspirin with me, and that was how we did it 3 times a week. Well, it was a tremendous job to design and to bring into his mind the needs of what was to go into this temple. As a result, I guess I know where every electric plug and every pipe in this building goes.
How many weeks did you have to meet like that?
Oh, this was over a year. Over a year. And then once we had the design and then to get the contracts, it took almost 3 years to build this place from 69 to 72. In 1972, when I was teaching the confirmation class, and we were hoping that we would be moving into the new temple, I promised the confirmation class that they would be confirmed in the new temple. Little knowing that all we would have up by the time of confirmation, 1972, in the spring, May, would be the roof and a concrete floor. No pews, no carpeting, no altar, no nothing. But we had our first confirmation. We rented chairs and filled in a makeshift pulpit and altar. We did it because the sanctuary was the last thing to be completed. Well, the rest of the building is plain, simple construction, classrooms, offices, auditorium. That was relatively simple. The pouring of the concrete, and then the marble that Yamasaki had requisitioned from Carrara, Italy, came in cracked. So we had to send back and wait for another shipment of the Carrara white marble that decorated the... It was all a very wonderful experience. And then moving into the new temple.
How did you open the building? How did you...
With great ceremonies and dedication, beautiful brochure. We invited speakers from all over. The president of the Hebraic College in Cincinnati came to dedicate the new temple. And it was a great, and a civic affair too. We had many of our notables. The dedication was like the dedication of the ancient temple in Jerusalem. And we hoped it would last longer.
Do you want to get a drink?
Yes.
Well, that is a wonderful narrative. From 51 through 72. Got
Yes.
here in the early 50s.
Yes.
And the congregation and just building the school and the bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah program, and learning the Bethel way in terms of Leonard Simons and that whole thing.
Yeah.
I noticed that you didn't say, I got Leonard to understand how it should be.
No. Poor Leonard Simons just passed away a few weeks ago, at the age of 92. He was really a great, 91. He was really a very great person in our community. And he was a tremendous fundraiser. I used to say, if a child swallows a penny, don't call a doctor. Call Leonard Simons. He can get money out of anyone. Well, he was a great fundraiser and a great public servant. He believed in giving back to the community what you had and being a super citizen in every sense of the word. He and I became great friends, even though in the very beginning we didn't exactly see eye to eye. But he was a very warm-hearted, giving person and cared for the community.
How do you see, what are the differences you see today in today's congregation from the congregation in 1951? How are we different?
The men and women who built congregation under Rabbi Franklin and Rabbi Glazer, believed in their rabbi and trusted them and supported them. The people who built those early founders of Bethel, so to speak, have largely died out. Most of them who had sons and daughters found that those sons and daughters did not pick up the way their fathers had. They're all buried in Woodmere Cemetery, the old German cemetery in south end of Detroit. New people came in to join the congregation, and many of them had come from more traditional backgrounds, Orthodox and even conservative or neoconservative synagogues. Moreover, they were mostly from East European backgrounds, Russian, Polish, Romanian, not German or Germanic in the way of Rabbi Franklin's generation. They came in with much more traditional views on Judaism and Jewish life. Moreover, with the establishment of the State of Israel after World War II, the generation of Rabbi Franklin, which was a non-Zionist, in some cases anti-Zionist. When I first came here, the American Council for Judaism, which was the strong anti-Zionist movement that was founded by some people from Pontiac, Michigan, was quite strong. I, being a Zionist from the very start, not a red-hot Zionist, but somebody who supported, was confronted with the American Council for Judaism. And I said to my people, let's not fight with them. Just ignore them. Ignore them, and you will find that their leadership will fall by itself. And that's exactly what happened. In the communities where rabbis fought with the American Council for Judaism lay people, they were devastated. I felt that was the wrong tactic. And within a couple of years, within a few years, that leadership disintegrated. They're nice people, but they were not leaders of the Jewish life in a Jewish community. Fortunately, the Jewish Welfare Federation of Detroit and the UJA people picked up the cudgels and fought the battle for me. I didn't have to do anything. And if anything, I supported them because I believed in what they were doing in supporting Israel, this new little country that was just established in 1947 and 48. Here I came just barely 4 or 5 years later.
Was the flag of the State of Israel on the bema?
No.
When did it go up there?
We had the American flag, and the question never arose until I had Abba Eban come to speak. And I felt that he, as the representative of the State of Israel, then Foreign Secretary, we should have that. I learned in my Army experience that flags had a protocol, and that there's a definite protocol of how the American flag and other flags of foreign countries should be held. And I felt that the State of Israel had a flag, they were a foreign country, and that they should be represented. And I think that's how it happened, but I don't remember exactly the time and place. All I know is that we had the flag of Israel on the pulpit with the American flag.
This question of the changing of the makeup of the congregation from the German
Mhm.
founders of the congregation
Yes.
through, I'm hearing that a lot. I've noticed that a lot.
Yes.
When you got here, was the service reflecting the German background?
It was the old Classical Union prayer book
Okay.
that we used, and it was a beautiful service, but not very much different from it was in Rabbi Glazer's day or Rabbi Franklin's day.
I had heard that at one time this was a German service that we had here,
Oh, that was a
That's-
very long time ago.
and the vestiges were gone.
The German Minhag America was the prayer book used before Isaac M. Wise's day, back in the 1870s and 80s and 90s. And nothing of that in my day.
So, but the kind of people changed.
Yes, and the choir changed too. The music, before Jason Ticton's time, the choir was almost entirely non-Jewish, and the music was the same music that had been used for generations. Jason introduced new music. Where he could, he had Jewish soloists, but also non-Jewish soloists in the choir too. And all in all, it was a very beautiful relationship that I had with Jason Ticton.
When did he come?
He came before me. He was already the organist when I came. And as the organist, he was also the director of the choir. He started out as a young kid, 17, 18 years old, as a choir master. And we got along so beautifully. Never was there a difference. It was just a pleasure to he was that kind, and Mamie too, both of them. Mamie I had in the religious school, teaching the children the songs that she, and building the choir, and she was lovely, a pleasure to work with.
What do you think has been really the achievement or the set of achievements that you feel are the most legacy for you? I'm hearing the building is one thing.
Yes,
The move.
the building and paying for it, because that was we spent after we moved in and had this enormous mortgage. We had to pay $25,000 on the first of every month. And the calendar moves around so quickly, month after month after month. The last thing that I did just before I retired, the week before I retired, we had a service of burning the mortgage. The mortgage was really an elephant to carry. It also meant that we couldn't have money for many other programs that we wanted to have, or pay salaries or secretaries or other kinds of things. Everything had to do with the mortgage. I felt that when I finally retired, I was leaving to my successor a legacy of a debt-free building. Well, that didn't prove to be the greatest legacy.
What do you think, in terms of the congregation, do you see the congregation as essentially the same or as very different? I mean,
No,
you
it's-
talked about the German people and the
Yes.
migration and the opening up, but
It's,
do you see
I
as the
see
same?
it very different now
okay.
than it was. For one thing, the leaders, the trustees of the temple, are no longer the owners and large benefactors of the community. They are largely middle managers now. People who work in middle, they are professional people, lawyers and doctors, etc. But for the corporation or the large department store owners, things like that, it's a different kind. They look upon the rabbi and the others as their employees, just as they are employees of their companies and corporations. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, but it's a different situation.
Than when you came?
Oh yes.
Okay.
And the people who are now trustees are no longer the wealthy benefactors of the community.
Why do you think that is?
It's a different situation. There are no Nate Shapiros and Sidney Allens and I. Himmelhochs and others like that who own their own businesses and who have been very generous to the community as well. They're nice people, but they're not people of large, with few exceptions. The Ben Moss, the B.L. Moss, we don't have such a person.
That affects us financially?
Yes, tremendously so. Ben Moss, beside giving this chapel in which we are speaking, would at a board of trustees meeting, when some project would come up and we didn't have funding for it from the budget, he would pound his head on the table, "I'll give it." And he did, because he saw the need of some wonderful project. And that kind of person is most unusual.
What other kind of impacts do you see in that?
I see that this is something different. As a result, we have constant fundraisers. Some successful, more successful than others. And every I've conceived of one other idea I should mention in connection with fundraising. When people can't give millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they can give $5 and $10 contributions, we established an idea of special funds. A special fund in memory of or in honor of somebody for a modest amount of money, where people can make contributions to support some idea, whether it's music or art or literature or activities or youth or whatever. And as a result, we have now, we must have 40, 50 or more of these special funds that help raise money to carry out and fund ideas and projects and programs that otherwise the budget cannot carry. That is something that has happened in recent years. And I think it's good. First of all, it allows a family to memorialize someone, a loved one, with their name. And secondly, it allows others to make contributions in a modest amount of $5, $10, $25 that all adds up. And thirdly, it enables the congregation to participate in many worthwhile projects and programs, both nationally and even internationally, here in Israel and elsewhere, all of which were at the discretion of the rabbi. And these programs and projects that are funded enabled the rabbi to be a part of many good causes.
You know, we haven't talked at all about social activism, and you've been very active. You talked about
Yes.
the community of Detroit, that kind of thing. But I kind of want to start you off by asking, why did you decide and when did you decide that you needed to be involved in the community in terms of specifically ecumenical and race relations issues?
I came out of that from Chicago. My father-in-law, Rabbi Louis Mann, was preeminent in this field, and I learned a great deal from him. By the time I came to Detroit, I already had been very involved with Chicago and the ecumenical movement of churches and synagogues there, with black relationship and so forth. So that when I came here, it was only natural that it was my field. Moreover, nationally, the Union of American Hebrew Congregations under Maurice Eisendrath, its new director, president, had set out to establish a national social action program with a center in Washington. And I supported that idea from the very beginning. I thought it was a wonderful thing, that Reform Judaism should have a voice and should speak out and also be part of the coalitions with other groups. You can't fight social action alone. You have to have a coalition. You have to have partners, Christian and Jewish, black and white, to whether it's the cause of education or housing or whatever it is. So as a result, I felt that it was important not only to support it nationally, but here on the grassroots of Detroit, we should have similar kinds of programs. And therefore, I, from the very start of my ministry here, began to become involved and seek out and reach out to other clergy. We had, for example, a group of clergy called the Wranglers, one minister from each denomination who meet every other Tuesday for dinner and read a paper and then wrangle over the issues of the day. I was a part of that from the very. I inherited my seat from Rabbi Glazer, who inherited his seat from Rabbi Franklin. That Wranglers group goes back to World War I and that period of time. So I had access then to 20, 30 different denominations, and I used those wonderful relationships that I had for building and forming coalitions on projects and programs